So Rogers calls our next guest, and he's like, yeah, I didn't really expect to have this call and have this set up. And there's a twofold reason for having Brad Hagen, the head coach of the Sam Houston State women's bowling team, on. One is because I just like to, and Rod, you know me, I like to sometimes bring coaches that you don't expect, maybe you don't know, introduce you to some folks that you maybe haven't had a chance to talk about. I'm guessing there's probably a lot of people that don't even know bowling is an NCAA sport. So that's part of the reason. Also, we have a big bowling, a bowl-off going on, a bowlerama going on tonight between two of our hosts here at Townsquare Media. And so I want to get Coach Hagen to talk to us a little bit about that and maybe preparing and how they should go about mentally preparing for this kind of challenge. So we welcome in Brad Hagen in his 10th season at the helm of the Sam Houston State women's bowling squad. 2014 national champions, 8 NCAA championship qualifications. I mean, the resume is fantastic. Coach, how the heck are you?
I'm doing fine. I appreciate the phone call and hopefully chiming in, give a little advice.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that in a bit. That's a little later in the show. But I do like one of the things I really enjoy on the show is educating folks on things they may not know. That's why we talk to softball coaches. We'll talk to Division III coaches from time to time. You know, we like to kind of go all over the place and introduce folks. I've got to imagine when you go and introduce yourself to someone and you say, I'm a bowling coach in college, I've got to imagine that raises an eyebrow or two early on. I can't imagine a lot of people even know that bowling is a sport at the NCAA level.
Well, I sincerely appreciate the PR, and I appreciate you guys diversifying the show. Yeah, it's exciting and it's odd sometimes because when you tell somebody you're not only an NCAA Division I coach, and then you tell them you do it professionally, and then you tell them, oh, on top of that, I get to coach internationally as well and travel the world. They are sometimes taken back by that, and the first question sometimes they ask, well, how do you do it? Well, no different than any other major sport. We're on the road a lot. We recruit a lot. We recruit for all over around the world. Yeah, but it's always an interesting conversation sometimes, and one that's never short, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, we'll have you here for a few minutes, that's for sure, going into this. So you said you recruit internationally, you're all over the place. You know, we see there's a very real trend in women's tennis, and that you get a lot of international players, a lot of Eastern European, Russian-type players. You see that a lot. What's your recruiting base? Is there a lot of, do you get a lot of Americans in there? Do you have to go recruit internationally? How do you go about filling a team?
I don't think anybody has to recruit internationally. It's just nice, same idea, to diversify the team. When you're building the culture around the program, you want the right personalities. You want the right individuals who are going to contribute at a high level. So I think sometimes that's why you see teams in sports go internationally, just because the culture of the sports may vary country to country. But we've had a lot of different international influences on this team. For instance, currently right now, out of 8 ladies on the team, 5 of them are international. Mm-hmm. We have a young lady. She was a Division I Rookie of the Year. Last year, she was she is from the Philippines. We have a young lady from Finland. We have a young lady from Israel. We have a young lady on the team from Singapore. And here's the random one for you. If you know where the country Brunei is.
There you go.
So we have quite a bit of Asian influence on the team, but traditionally over the years, we've had Canadians, we've had Dominicans, we've had Puerto Ricans. So yeah, we're kind of all over the board, and just kind of depends on what we need at the time and what shoes we got to fill. And I'm all over the country. It's not like I don't recruit Americans. It's just I kind of know what I'm looking for. If I can find it abroad or domestically, that's the route I'm going to go.
They have large bowling shoes to fill. Don't forget to throw that in there, Coach. I am curious though. What's the? How do you go about finding players? I mean, look, I'm a guy. I don't know from high school bowling, right? I don't know. Is it a prevalent sport in America, or is it more prevalent out of America? How do you go about identifying players that you want to go get? Are there kind of like in basketball in Europe? Are there under 19 leagues and things like that? Tell me about how you go about finding these players.
I personally, in quite a few of the bigger programs, we go to anything we can go to where we think we may find a gem. So there are major, national youth events, similar to like AAU stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's high school national championships. There's state championships. Bowling is actually a varsity sport in, I believe, 26 to 28 countries, plus or minus. So those states are good to go to. Here in Texas, it's actually the number one club sport in the state, but it's not a varsity sport.
Right.
So you're going to vary from states that have it at a varsity level versus a club level. But there's major events in the youth world for bowling. One called Teen Masters. There's one called like the Youth Masters. Our major one, which is basically Junior Team USA Trials, but it's called Junior Gold. That one travels all over the country and usually has between 500 and 900 U20 girls that participate, varying on, they've had some rules changes over the years. So there's still some major events going on. Ball, like corporate sponsors,
mm-hmm.
they host some major youth events. So you have those potpourri all over the United States throughout the year. And that's just domestically. Internationally, there's European Youth Championships. Our zone, the American zone, is called PAPCON. So there's the PAPCON Youth Championships every 2 years. We have the World Youth Championships. That's actually coming up this fall, so that's a good one to kind of scout out. So there's the Asian Youth Championships. So there's major events
mm-hmm.
all over the world. And then there's those local city tournaments, high school tournaments, state tournaments. So at the end of the day, it's no different than any other sport. You're checking emails, you're doing research, you're trying to hunt down film, hearsay, et cetera, and you just try to find quality student athletes that fit your mold.
Talking to Brad Hagen, the women's bowling coach at Sam Houston, won the 2014 national championship. I'm curious. I know a lot of basketball coaches, football coaches. We're traveling around to high schools. We need to see these kids. It's great to have their huddle film, but we need to put eyes on them. How important is it for you to go and see someone in person versus can you see what you need to on film?
It's personally for me, it's important. I've shotgun trips before just to go watch a girl in something random.
Yeah.
You want to see them you want to see them in their comfort zone and in their environment, but you also want to see them outside of that. So I think film's great. Sometimes you can get a lot of information from film, but you don't get a feel of their mannerisms, their body language, kind of their personality, how they kind of come and go with their business. So for me, putting eyes on them is super important just because you get a little more of a holistic view of their personality traits. And I think that's something that's super, super important and something I think in our sport that's not taken seriously enough. But it is growing and teams are getting more competitive. So their selection process is becoming a lot more defined, which I think is important. But that also shows the growth of our sport over the last 15 years. And since 2004, now we're pushing almost 90 universities between Division I, II, and III total. So,
nice.
As things expand, people's recruiting processes change, and there's more athletes for everybody. So, but not to get off tangent, but I personally believe it's important to see them with your own eyes.
Coach, I'm curious the coaching aspect of things, right? Because I think of golf coaches, and golf coaches are a lot of times these players know what they're doing. They know how to swing. You're giving them small tips here and there. Hey, maybe this angle's wrong, that kind of thing. What goes into coaching a bowler? Is it as much mental as physical? Is it more physical than we expect in terms of correcting technique? What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
It just varies per student athlete, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big proponent of the mental game. I think you can't stress that enough. especially nowadays with just so many distractions and so many things just in society going on that play roles in our day-to-day lives and professions and jobs. So I think the mental game is a huge component. And over the last 2-3 years, I've tried to implement that more so. Physically, everybody comes in pretty fundamentally sound. It's just getting them out of habits that may either be a detriment to their health or something that may cause injury. So fit is a big deal when it comes to fitting a bowling ball, because that can affect the physical things that are happening. So it's very important, but we do a lot of stuff in the gym. We do a lot of preventive maintenance kind of stuff, I guess I would say. A lot of band work. We travel more than anybody in our athletic department, and we're basically kind of like basketball, where we start before them, but we end after them.
Yeah.
But so our season's so long, so physically we do a lot of simple things. It's in this time of the year, it's not about reinventing the wheel, but the fundamentals are fundamentals, and you can't stop practicing fundamentals, and all you can do is keep cleaning them up and trying to do them right until they're right, and then you can't do them wrong. So it's just kind of part of that coaching philosophy of work, and hopefully be in a good place. But for me, preventive stuff is so important, which goes along with the physical stuff. Just you got to keep your athletes healthy by any means necessary.
Absolutely. Talking to Brad Hagen, the women's bowling coach at Sam Houston. Take me to 2014. You defeat Nebraska, who was the defending champ. You win your first ever national title. You've been in the running. You've been up there in the national rankings in top 5, basically the rest of the time after that. But give me some indication of what that 14 season was like.
14 was kind of crazy. There were moments of highs and there were moments of lows. And the first half, we hit some pretty low times just with how everybody was meshing and the events we were going to. We were taking bad losses, but having some good wins in there too. So that year, fall of 13, spring of 14 or whatnot, it was a tale of two different stories, really. In the spring, we really had to kind of regroup and refocus and get our priorities on straight, and had to make some changes with the team and the roster, and thank God everything worked out. But the team that showed up in the second half was completely a different team than that fall, and that really was what was important. And we really had some good senior leaders that year. They were part of the first class that came in, so they really got it, and they knew how important everything was, and they had that grit in the spring, and the refusal anyways of mediocrity wasn't a good thing, and they were going to find a way, and that really defined that second half. And going in the postseason and nationals at that time, we by far weren't the best team that year in that field, and just to make the show to compete against Nebraska, we actually had to beat the number 1 team in the country, who was very deep and very talented, twice, just to stay in the winners bracket and get on TV, and then face, at the time, Nebraska being the juggernaut they have been and continue to be so. And at the end of the day, we had some good senior leadership, and we had a lot of heart on the team going into April, and that's really what it's about when you hit postseason. Absolutely.
All right, Coach, I want to turn my attention to this big match we got going on. We've got the youngster, the upstart Jay Whatley, who's actually in studio with us right now. He came down from his studio to join us against the old man. Is Fletcher double nickels, or is he? He'll be this year. Okay, he's 54, about to be 55. He's got like a degenerative bone disease of some kind. He's got all the built-in excuses. We've got the youngster who bowls a bunch in Jay Whatley here with us. We got the old man in Fletcher who doesn't. Whatley's spotting him in 3 games, 175 pins. So I want to know first, give me a handicap on a guy that what are you, about a 160?
Probably a 160, 180.
160 to 180 type guy against a guy who hasn't bowled in probably 5 or 6 years. Start with the handicapping. Is 175 pins, you think, just right? Is it too much? What do you think? None of us know how the old man's going to bowl.
it's good to have an ace in the hole or maybe be a wild card. I would say that's probably on the high end personally. If the other gentleman's a 160, 170, you got to figure the other gentleman's good for on a bad game, maybe 120 to 130. But I feel confident the handicap's a little high, but I think you could spot him a good 40 a game.
See, I'm so glad that the coach, the expert, agrees with me on this. Fletcher, he refused to do it unless I gave him 175. I told him the highest I wanted to go was 50 a game because I could go. I bowled last week. I bowled a 240. I could do that, but also the next game I could go 120. And at 175 is just way too much. I think I'm the underdog.
I would do this if you guys agree to the terms. After 2 games, re-rate the handicap. If it's not within X amount of pins, or if it's a blowout because of the handicap, I would re-rate it.
I like this guy.
Kind of a thing in certain tournaments.
But that's assuming that old decrepit Fletcher can get through 2 games.
Right. He may not make it through 2. His back might give out on him before it's before it gets there. Okay.
Hey, we'll send our trainer up there. We're all about the preventive.
Actually, I wanted to hit you with that because you mentioned preventative, working on preventing injuries. Give some advice because I know the old man's listening right now. Give him maybe some stretches or something he can do to try to do his best to be ready for this and not go in traction tomorrow.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's kind of about the tension your body's going to be able to withstand for sure, especially going into 3 games. First and foremost, stretch and be hydrated. A lot of people don't realize this. Bowling actually burns a lot of calories, and it's a very physical sport.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is you're very physical with your body because you got this really heavy object on your body called your head that you're trying to balance and keep your center of gravity centered and where it needs to be. And then now you're slinging a 13 to 15-pound bowling ball, maybe front and backwards. So, you got to make sure your body's nice and limber and you're stretched and you're ready to go. And I can't emphasize enough, if you don't have your own shoes, be super careful of those house shoes because you might as well be bowling in an ice skate ring. Yeah, they get dangerous.
Well, and you never know if they didn't spray enough Lysol in them, there might be the coronavirus hanging out in those things. You never know.
Hey, look, he said stretching.
Yeah, they might be a little funky.
Folks at the radio station, Fletcher included, last year, I couldn't bowl for about 3 months because I pulled a muscle on my left butt cheek. I don't know the correct
Gluteus maximus.
term. Yes, that. Yeah. Totally just ripped it. I mean, it was solid blue. Could barely walk. Just bowling just went wrong at the lane once and just snapped that thing.
Stretch out.
It was horrible.
So think about you guys potentially bowling 3 games, correct?
Yeah.
So it's in essence, that's probably a max of 33 frames, or even now. So if you take 2 shots a game, you do the math. But now times that by what we're doing thousands of frames a week, and then on top of that, traveling all over the country, 6 weeks of competition, another 2 weeks for postseason. So we're 2 months in almost. So preventive stuff is super important for me and keeping the ladies physically fit. So I can't emphasize enough. Stretch, maybe do a little limbering stretching this evening, tomorrow morning, and that way you're not just jumping in blind.
Yeah, absolutely. Brad Hagen, the women's bowling coach for Sam Houston. Last thing for you, Coach. Give me, because I know you've been in matches where you're the favorite and you've been in matches where you're the underdog. Tell me about a mental approach for these 2 guys, because Whatley can say he's the underdog, but he's the favorite, even with the 175 pins. Fletcher's the underdog. What should they be mentally thinking coming from each position?
Treat nothing differently. I can't emphasize that enough. It's always about the process with us. It's always about staying focused. It's about seeing what you want to see and executing. I'm a big proponent of everything happens twice, once in your mind and once in reality. So the more pre-shot routines and the more you focus on the here and now and keep things simplistic. So, first off, hit the head pin, which is the pin closest to you. Whatever's left, worry about that. Don't worry about striking. It's all about filling frames at the end of the day, especially in competition. And it's about managing the lane and the emotion. So the more you stay present not worry about your opponent, because again, at the end of the day, your biggest opponent is what's in front of you in that invisible playing field that's out in front of you anyways. And oh, by the way, you're trying to beat whomever you're beating. So yeah, it's all about mentally staying present and not to be cliche, but it is a one shot at a time kind of process, and you can't get ahead of yourself. And both the gentlemen competing, I'm sure, and capable of shooting a number as they probably have at one point in their life, but you don't go out going, I'm going to shoot 240 on someone. You're going to go out there and priorities knock down 10 pins, and we got a beautiful sport where you get two chances at it.
Oh, that's beautiful. Last thing, Coach, is there a lot of trash talk in bowling? Like, do they talk to each other at all?
Yeah, we try to limit that, and we have rules against that. Just no different than any other sport with sportsmanship. But the coaches get into it once in a while, and we got a pretty close clientele. So there's not really too much going on, but there are those heat of the moment kind of cheering and yelling, and those are kind of those psychological warfare moments where teams get a little amped up. So there's different ways to kind of talk smack, but it's more of a psychological thing. There really isn't anything verbally coming out, just because we try to keep it as proper as possible. Not that there's not times we want to say things, but
sure.
We try to avoid that and try to take the higher road.
All right, Whatley, anything else for the coach?
Oh, there's going to be trash talk tonight. Let me tell you, it's going to be real loud. We're going to be hydrated on the Bud Lights, and I'm telling you right now, I'm going to stomp them. I probably should have gave him 200 pins.
Oh, there we go. I love it.
Thank you, Coach.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I love it. Coach, thank you so much for your time, man. We really appreciate it. Oh, by the way, when's the next time y'all are competing?
We are actually leaving to head up to Central Jersey on Thursday morning. We head up there for Monmouth University's event, and then we turn right around the following weekend and head to Nashville for Vanderbilt's event, and that's the end of our regular season.